that. Okay, so we are done with the regular languages. I think there was one question number 4 in the assignment, right? That everyone was confused how it can be done or something like that. Let me give you one example of that for D1. So when I say D1 on, let me say that, so what D1 will be? D1 will be actually all the strings x part of sigma star such that if you take the distance between x and a y for some, this will be, distance will be less or equals to 1 for y belonging to L, right? So this is D1. If I have to design this, so what is given? Always start, whenever it is asked, prove D1 is regular. If someone asks you that, you have to be certain you have to design a machine. You have to give either the 5 components or you have to understand the concept, right? Plain. You have to give a machine. Or you have to prove it using other languages that, okay, there is a union, intersection, or some properties you are using, and you are able to construct this language using other proven to be regular languages using whatever the proved closed operations. So here let's say that there is a DFA for D1 or a DFA or NFA, whatever, I don't know. Let's say DFA. Anyway, we can assume there is a DFA. So let's say DFA. This is a start state. There will be some final states, right? And there will be some intermediate states, right? Now, because it's a DFA, so from every state, because sigma was 0, 1. So from every state here, what you will have, it is certain for every state I, there is an arrow going to some j, for 0 and for 1 there is an arrow going to some k. Now this I, j and k can be I itself or some other states or same states, whatever, I don't know. So basically the scenario is that from I there is a transition in the DFA. Certainly for every state this holds, that it is going to some state j and k. Now this j and k all can be same as I itself or something, if it is a self loop or something like that. What I have to do, I need to accept all the languages for D1 which were either in L, right? So when you say D0, it is actually L itself. So it should be still accepting all those strings. So that means you need this DFA. But in addition to that, you need something more. What you need something more? That is, if you say D1 minus D0. What is D1 minus D0? It is another machine. It is all those strings which are exactly one bit different from any string of L. Right? So if I have to design such a DFA, what I need to do? Designing the DFA might be difficult, but designing an NFA will be simpler and you don't need to separate it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take another copy of the same DFA. See what I'm doing. I have took another copy of the same DFA, same states. Now this is my I, this is my j on this machine, and this is my k. Let me rewrite at least this part. Okay, so this is my j, this is my k, this is my I, and this is supposed to be the start state. So I am not marking is at a start, I just have taken the copy. So this was supposed to be a start state, but what I am going to do the modification, I first remove this, that okay, there is no start state. This whole thing is a single machine. Now if you start from this start state and you take any string which is part of L, where does it take? It takes you to one of these final states, right? And you want to know that if I have a bit change of exactly 1, I should be able to detect it. But how you going to detect that bit change happens at what place? So for that we have to insert a bit change kind of phenomena. And again, see, whenever a bit is changing, you have to change a state to understand there is a bit changed on this. Now assume that when you were at I and you were moving from 0 using some string and you were going to j. If the bit is changing at this point of time, how you can know? While still further you have to perform the same operation, right? If w was the string, this whole thing, and there was a 0 which was occurring for this I to j, right? So when there is a bit change, the same string you have, but it becomes 1. But afterwards the processing should be same. Before the processing should have been same. Only for this there has to be a change, and you have to understand and you have to capture it by some state. And the method to do is something very simple. If you are going by 0 to this j, you just take arrow from this I on the first machine to j on the second machine with 1. See the beauty. If you were moving and accepting on this machine, you are moving with a 0 here and you are going ahead. But if you move with a 1, what happens? That's what is the bit change that happened here. After this j, again because it is a copy of the same machine, you will be moving just like the previous one and you will be accepting the string. Similarly, if it was a 1 going to k, you have to add a transition arrow from this state to k using 0. Right? Now, this is what you have to do for every state. That if there is a transition going from I to j, 0 on 0, so when you have another copy of this I dash, j dash, k dash, what you need to do? You go at 1 to j and you go at 0 to k dash by flipping. Now what will happen? You will exactly teleported from this DFA to this DFA, and this is no more a DFA. If you look at it, is now NFA. Now this NFA will have 2 branches exactly. If you realize, this NFA will have exactly 2 branches. One of the branching will take you in the direction of first DFA, but not just 2 branches. Actually, at every place, it will be now branching every state to check whether the bit change is happening at this point or not, right? So when you start from the start state on this NFA, if this is a start state, the first whatever the symbol you're going to take, you will take one option on the same DFA, the other on the other one for every symbol, and that's what you're going to do. For every state, it will be splitting into 2. One, are you going forward on the same state, or you are jumping on the other state by taking a bit flipped, and bit flip means going to a distance 1. And once you are on this machine, there is no way to go back to the previous machine. That means you cannot, further processing will remain. Once you are here, it's a simple DFA processing. So once for any branch you have shifted to the second machine, you will process linearly. Right. So this is for distance 1, and because you have final states at both of the places, therefore it is going to accept if the string was accepted by the previous DFA or even for the following one that you have added. So it is going to accept all the string which were part of L. So this is what accepts L part. This is what is accepted D1 minus D0 part. So this accepts D0. This accepts D1 minus D0. Is it clear, or anyone has any doubt? Now if you have to do it for DK, you just have to do one thing. What do you need to do? Anyone has any idea? You just have to take k copies. This is your first DFA D, which with a start state. You have to take copy 1, copy 2, copy 3 up to k copies. Now, one time shift you will take, you will come to this DFA. Next time shift you will take, you will come to this DFA. So as soon as you will keep switching the distance, you will be coming, and likewise. So if your string is accepted, and this is a big NFA, right? You have already removed all the states. So when you have this NFA, and when any string is accepted by this final state, you know that. But if you have kept final states on each of these, that means it is accepting less than equals to k. If the condition comes, it must be equals to k, then you have to remove all these final states, just keep the final state on the last machine. That makes sure that only the strings that take you from this to this machine and further go to final state, only those will be accepted. Right? Is it clear, or anyone has any doubt in that? I'm not very clear with the question, Shashwat. Can you just unmute yourself and speak? I think that will be much better than.
Sir, I was asking that how do we approach these kind of questions? Like now it's very obvious that we know the solution, but at the time when the question was given, it was very strange.
No, that's what. See, when you see, always what has to be back in your mind is that when you have a machine, only that. This, whenever you are given a language which is supposed to be regular, you have a machine. How can you use this machine to construct the given job on the other machine? For example, I asked this question to many of you during your Viva, and the language was that suppose that there is a flip of the whole binary string. Now, many of you were able to capture it. That if you have to flip all the binary strings, what you have to do? You have to take another machine. Now you just have to see that if on this machine you are going from I to j, right, on 0, now on this machine you have to go from I to j for 1. Right. So if this machine was accepting any binary string, this will accept exactly the flipped string. So you have to understand the problem. What we are doing, we have given a small solution in form of a machine. That is an algorithm, right? I don't know what that algorithm, but that gives me something. Now a new problem is given and you have to use that small solution. You don't know what it is. You just know that, okay, it starts and it works in the following way. How can you use that without knowing in your context and construct a new algorithm that solves? If that exists, then this also exists. What I mean, if L is regular because of this machine, then this L dash that you are constructing, it will be regular because of the new construction. And this all idea, the logic, there is no way to feed logic in your brain, right? You have to develop it. So that's what, you guys are gonna be a good programmer. No one can teach you the logic part of the programming. Only you can understand the syntax by using. Logic is something that your brain develops with time by solving as many as problems. It learns techniques. In algorithm course, you will be learning a lot of different types of algorithms that can exist. Dynamic programming, greedy. So these are approaches, but no one teaches you that if this is the problem, you have to apply this. You always try to understand the problem. You have to understand what kind of problem it is. Have you ever seen anything like that? Or you have to try and then you have to solve. There is no way. Anything else from anyone? So the only way to develop the intuition for solving such kind of question is by practicing. If you solve a lot of questions, you will develop the intuition, okay, I have to design a machine. How can I use that? How I can flip things? How I can change the bit? How I can, there can be several such kind of questions, right? Concatenation, there can be several possibilities. And it all comes, see what I have done. I have just taken two machines, I have connected it by some added transition. It is the same technique that we used for proving that concatenation is closed or anything else. It is not any new technique. We have already used few copies of the machine and added or concatenated or added few more transitions. That's what we are doing. The only thing is I did not give you a lot of questions on that. But you should really go ahead, search, and you have to practice it. I cannot keep giving, then you are just trained on a line, right? Okay. So if there is any question, then please raise it, otherwise we'll move to the next chapter. Okay, so let us jump to the next topic, which is, so we have talked about regular languages. Let's talk about something bigger, which is called CFL. What is CFL? It is context free language. Okay. What is a context free language? So I think this is something, and context free languages, here you're going to talk about a new representation of a kind of structure that defines a language. So far we talked about machines or expressions that were defining machine, right? We had, for machines we talked about DFA, we talked about NFA, or we talked about ENFA. Then for expressions we talked about, okay, there can be regular expressions that also represent some language. Now there is another thing which is called grammars, and there is something called regular grammar. So for any language there is a grammar, just like in English we have an English grammar, for Hindi we have Vyakaran. For every language there is a grammar. What is a grammar? Grammar defines the set of rules. And even for programming language there is a grammar, right? You say your syntax is incorrect. What do you mean by that? It means that you have not written it as per the rules of the language. Those rules are actually governed by this something called, the collection of the rules are called grammar. So for context free languages, we're going to first discuss what is a context free grammar, which represents those languages, right? It actually derives those languages. Now, context-free grammar, you understand the importance of it is that it is the only thing that helped build the compilers. Without that, really all this development that happened is not possible. Because of the compilers, we are able to compile codes, and also I don't need to go and motivate you on compilers, but without context-free grammars, the compiler's existence is very difficult. It is one of the most important construct in developing a compiler, and it does all the matching. You might have seen parenthesis matching, you might have seen, okay, you have missed this semicolon, you have missing parenthesis. All that is because of context free grammar in your programming languages. So you will realize that how this is done. This is theory. This course is meant to be theory, but you will be using and implementing in your introduction to language processing course, and there you will realize that how this theory helps you really do all that in the back end when you are doing a program, when you are writing a program. Okay, so basically context free grammars and also are used in XML, right? So document type design or something you are doing in XML, it's heavily used there. So it has a lot of application. Now context free grammar has what it adds and how we get to this model. We talked about these machines And there is a regular grammar also which we did not talk, but we will talk as a special case of context free grammar very soon. From these machines, how we evolve further. So we tried already, we took a DFA. What we said, okay, remove the restriction of adding all the things, go to multiple states at the same time for a given input. Then you said, okay, don't use any input, still you are able to move from any state to any state. But all that did not increase the power. Then we said, okay, the biggest problem that we had in the DFAs was we were not able to memorize anything. We were not able to store anything, and that was the biggest limitation. So let us add a memory to it. So you add a memory, but it's not any memory, it's a stack kind of memory. What is the stack? That whatever you pushed last, right, on the stack, that is available. So there are two operations, push and pop. Push means you are putting whatever the element on the top of the stack, and when you are popping, you are getting whatever is on the top of the stack. So it is a restricted access to a memory. You are not able to access memory in any possible way, right? Like we do in our hard drives or something. We are doing it in a restricted way that wherever you have written last, you can access that first. Now, if you want to go to the bottom, you have to pop this information out, and then you will go to the bottom of that. Now, when you are popping it, you are not storing it anywhere. You are just discarding it because you don't have any other memory. You just have one memory that you can read and write in a restricted way, that is in the way of how stack works. So that is the next addition that we did on the machine, and because of that we will soon realize that the power of the machine has increased, right? So this context free grammar is a theoretical way of understanding this machine. It will represent, and we will prove that this machine, when we add this to our NFA, DFA and all, it becomes something called PDAs. It is called push down automaton, right? Because we are pushing it down on the stack and then we are popping. So its name is push down automaton. For NFA and DFA, if you add a stack as a memory, that's what it becomes. We'll come to that part at later stage. But currently, let's talk about context free grammars, right? So before starting the formal way of writing context free grammars, let's talk about a language which is not regular. So let's say palindrome. Okay, palindrome. So what is a palindrome? So let's define the language. That palindrome is actually x belongs to 0 1 star, such that x is a, what is a palindrome? So palindrome means if you take x, it is same as xr, right? Then you say that it is palindrome. So I could have written x belongs to this, such that x is equals to xr. It is another way of saying x is a palindrome. But if you reverse it, then still you are getting the same string. Now, if I have to really get the palindrome or define it, is it regular? The answer is no, right? You can take 0 to the power n, 1, 0 to the power n. This is a palindrome. So whenever your pumping length is n, you can take this string. This is certainly greater or equals to your, when you take the string as this, the length of w is certainly greater or equals to your pumping length. And then what you can do? You can just, all x and y part will come in zeros. When you are pumping the number of zeros, only the zeros on the left hand side of 1 will increase, not the other side. And because of that, what will happen? The number of zeros are here increasing while not here, so it's not a palindrome. I think you can very easily prove it using pumping lemma, that the language with palindrome is not actually a regular language. But let us define a recursive way how we can generate all possible palindromes, right? So the basic case, so the basis to define is epsilon, 0, 1. These three elements are by default a palindrome, right? Epsilon from left and right, it's the same. 0, a single 0 from forward and backward, it's reading the same. 1. So a single symbol or empty string, this all is a palindrome by default. Now, the inductive step, if you have to write, what does it say? That if some string W is a palindrome, then 0W0 and 1W0 will also be palindrome, right? It's a very simple way to define that if a string, a small string is a palindrome. Oh, yeah, correct. 1W1, correct. So, correct. So, I think it's a very basic inductive definition. Now, what context free does? It takes this recursive definition and it expresses it in a mathematical way, right? So, let us go to that definition and try to understand what context free grammar does. So, if I have to write a context free grammar for it, so it will be written something like, okay, this. So, a palindrome may be epsilon, a palindrome may be 0, a palindrome may be a 1, or a palindrome may be, I don't use something else, I say 0 and another palindrome string and 0, or a palindrome may be 0, 1, some other palindrome and 1. And this is the set of rules that define for the language of palindromes, right? So a palindrome can be epsilon, a palindrome can be a 0, a palindrome can be 1, or a palindrome can be starting and ending with 0 and some other palindrome in between, right? And the same for this rule. So this way of writing this recursive definition is called context free grammar. So there are 4 components for writing a context free grammar, right? So total 4 components. Component 1 is called V. V means variable. So again, I am not writing it, it's a finite set of variables, right? Next is T. T is called terminal, and you can think this terminal same as sigma. So it is basically, terminals are not something variable and it is representing sigma. Yes, there is epsilon also included in the terminal, right? So sigma union, you can say epsilon. Okay, that's a terminal. Then we have third component as production rules. So production rules are a finite set of rules that govern the context free grammar, and here you can see there are total 5 production rules, and this whole set of production rules is actually comes under P, right? Sorry, so I should be not using the same character, but you can assume that okay, this is a darken P. So that's a production rule, and the finally 4th one is S. So S is actually something that S is part of V and it's called start symbol. Now, so 4 components when we write, it's like a grammar is actually written just like we had 5 tuple systems in DFA. It's a 4 component system where you have to define these 4 components, then you are able to define a grammar. Now, here if you want to understand what a symbol means, a variable. So, variable actually represents some auxiliary strings, every variable. And the start variable that you are defining, that represents the language of the grammar. Okay, we'll understand all that, just wait for some seconds, right. So, there are some methods that we have to understand. So, there is something called compact notation. So, at place of writing these as at different lines or levels, I could use a compact way of writing the productions, and it can be used as epsilon or 0 or 1 or 0p0 or 1p1. So, this is a compact notation of what is written here. So, this long vertical line that represents OR. So, P is actually, P can be just epsilon or P can be 0 or one of these. Now, next is something that we need to understand is what is called derivation. Okay, before going to the derivation, see, always our question is whether a string belongs to a language, right? Always our question is that. And then this language is actually, here we are saying the language is represented by a grammar. So, the actual question is, does the string belong to the language of that grammar? So, there are 2 different ways to find it out. The first way is, it's called recursive inference. The other method is called derivation. Now, see, this exact thing, checking whether a string belongs to a language, is exactly your compilation process. You should be able to relate it that whenever you are asking a question that whether a string belongs to a language or not, exactly you are checking whether a program 1 that you have written is a correct program according to C language or not, or as per the syntax of C. Does it belong to all? So, you can assume that G may be a grammar. I don't know whether it's a context free or what, but let's say G is a grammar for C language. So, when you write LG, that means it defines all the C programs that can be written based on that syntax rules. What are the symbols there? Symbols are basically ASCII characters that you are using, right? Now, this language that you have defined, that's what you always check when you are doing a compilation. You always check that, okay, I have written a program. Does this program belong to this language or not? The compilation process itself is this, to check whether the written program is part of the language, and what it does, it checks if it follows all the syntax. So, that's what we are doing here. If you want to check it, there is a simple step, especially for the context free grammar, that happens during the compilation, is called parsing. So, parsing is nothing but checking whether your program is written correctly as per the syntax of the grammar. And there are 2 ways to do it. One is called derivation, recursive inference. Now, recursive inference, you will be studying it as a top down parsing. And okay, I have written it at the wrong place. Okay, so derivation is actually the top down parsing, and recursive inference is a bottom up parsing. This is nothing related to theory of computation, but I'm just taking and telling you this so that you understand what you are reading is something very much related to computer science, and it is used on the daily basis. Now, recursive inference is that given a string W, what you are doing, you are trying to check that does it belongs to LG or not by taking the string, and then you are using its string to reduce it to a smaller variable, and then further you are keep reducing it, and finally you try to reduce it to the start symbol. While the derivation is a different, it's an inverse process. You start from the start state, use the production rules and try to derive the string. We will understand both of these very quickly, right? With the help of example. But here what you do, you take the string and you go back to the start symbol. In the derivation, you start from the start symbol and you try to derive the string by guessing which production might be used. So these are two methods in general for checking the parsing. This is more conventional and this is more powerful than the other one. You will read and learn more about it in your compilers course, which is also named as Introduction to Language Processing. So let us understand what is a recursive inference and recursive derivation. So let's take the same grammar that we have already considered. So P is actually 0P0 or 1P1 or let's say 0 or a 1 or a epsilon, right? So this is a production rule. Now, if my string that is given to me is 0, 0, 1, 0, so 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, okay. Is it a palindrome? Yes, right? It's a palindrome. Now, take this string 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1. Now, what you can say about this string? Can I take some string? So, first of all, let's define all the components in this. So, your variable is just a single variable which is P. Your terminals are used here are actually 0 and 1. I don't mention epsilon as a terminal each time. You can assume that or you can exclude that. Now, the third one is the start symbol. It is P because it is the only symbol there as a variable, and these are the production rules, 5 production rules. Let's number them 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now, when you are starting with this string, if I can convert each of these backward. So, whenever you read a production, right, so production always have a variable on the left hand side, then you have an arrow going, and then you have something called alpha. So, what is V? So, at place of V, let me use a different symbol so that you don't get confused. So, let's say A. So, A is something, it's a single variable from the variable set. Alpha is a string formed based on variables and terminals. So, this is what is called head of the production, and this part in the right hand side of the arrow, it's called body of the production. So, in the recursive inference, what we do, we try to find any body in the string and we replace it by the head using some production. So, if I find that anything is matching with the body of any production, we convert it to its head. That's what is recursive inference. So, I can convert this one, this 0, all because it matches. A single symbol is matching, or even a epsilon here might be matching. Epsilon is present everywhere. I can convert epsilon also into P. But what is the most meaningful that will take me closer to my solution is that if I convert this one. So, if I take this one and I use the production this one and convert 1 to P, what I get next is 1 0 0 1 0, sorry, P 0 0 1. And I have used my production number 4 for it, right? Now, what else? What can I do in the next one? If you see this part, it is matching exactly with this part of the body. So I can use production number 1 that says that P goes to 0 P 0. So it can be reduced and I get 1 0 P 0 1. Again the same production number 1 can be used and you get 1 P 1. Now you can use production number 2 that gives you P goes to 1 P 1. Right, that production, and 1 P1 can be further reduced to P. What happened? You started with a string, you used productions, the body you tried to find a reasonable body that can be reduced into the head, and in that way you reached at the start symbol. Whenever for a given string you are able to do so, based on the production rules, you say that now W is part of the language of this grammar. Right? This is what is called recursive inference. Is it clear, or anyone has any doubt in this? So you are starting with a string, you are now the question might be which body should I pick? There are multiple options at a given point of time. That's what is the difficulty in parsing, right? That's what is the challenge in parsing. And there are different algorithms that does it in a different way. We are not discussing different parsing algorithms, so that is out of context, right? For now, do you understand the process that if there is some means, there is some oracle that is telling you, okay, you change this particular body to head, this particular body to head, and you will reach. It will definitely tell you if you are able to do so and you are able to reach at some particular given symbol. If it is a start symbol, then you should accept. If it is not, you should reject. That is what is the parsing algorithm for bottom up approach. Anyone has any doubt in the recursive inference? If not, then let's understand the derivation part. Let's take the same string 1 0 0 1 0 0 1, and our production rule was P goes to 0 1 0 P 0 1 P 1, and then it was 0 1 epsilon. Derivation is that you start from the start symbol, which is P again, and then we use this symbol which says that one step of derivation, right? So this is a symbol denoting one step of derivation. So what it says that whenever you have a variable, you can derive it further into something else based on the production rule. So you're going to use some production rule. If I use the production rule, let's say 2, I will be able to go to 1 P 1, right? So this is done because I have used production number 2 that says that P can be converted into 1 P 1 as per the production rule. Further, in next step of derivation, I can use any of the variables available in this string and further expand it using one of the production rules. So recursive inference is about reducing, derivation is about expanding variables. Again, I can take this P variable and then I can further expand it using, and that too again I have to see that okay, I am getting a 0 here. So somehow you are using this information and you can guess that next to use 0 P 0, and then you are using the production number 1 that P goes to 0 P 0, and you got this one. Then further in the next step you can derive again it as 1 0 0 P 0 0 1, and then this is using the same production, and finally this P becomes a 1. So 1 0 0 1 0 0 1, and this is because of this production. Now suppose that this 1 was not available, our string was just 100,001. What happens? Then at place of this you could have used the production p goes to epsilon. When you use p goes to epsilon, what you will be getting? You would have gotten from this the next derivation as 100 epsilon. Writing epsilon doesn't make sense, it disappears and you get this. So whenever it is possible to use the start state and you use valid derivation steps and you are able to reach to a string of terminals, a string comprising of only terminals, then you say that this string is actually derived from the start symbol, right? Now this multiple steps can be replaced by this one. So this is just like extended transition function. It says that 0 or more steps of derivation. So I can write that p can be derived into 1001001 in 0 or more steps, and which will be a valid way of writing it, right? So this is what is derivation. The previous one was recursive inference, and you say that a string is part of a language if you can use the grammar for that string to derive it from the start symbol, and for derivation you are using the production rules. Okay. Now this derivation we have already discussed about two things. So when you are deriving, basically what does it mean, the derivation step? That suppose that you have alpha a beta, you have reached at some intermediate step somewhere, and then you are using a production a goes to gamma. So you write that okay, this can be derived into alpha gamma beta, right, using this particular production. Now there are two variations of the derivation. One is called leftmost derivation, the other one is called rightmost derivation. In the derivation there are two different things. One is leftmost, the other one is rightmost, and the corresponding derivation symbols are labeled like this. This is leftmost and the extended one is written like this. For the rightmost you write this. Now what does it mean by leftmost or rightmost? We haven't seen any such example. So let us see one such example and then try to understand it. So let's take example of expression grammar, right? Let's take example of expression grammar. So here we have the grammar, the production rules as E goes to I, E plus E, E multiplied by E, or in the parenthesis. And further this I can be written as A, B, IA. This is the example I picked from the book. There can be other examples, I0, and so you should not understand it as I and subscript A. So let me write it as IA, IB, I0 and I1. So is I and 1, I and 0, and likewise. Okay, so these are the production rules. So if you have to define V, now V is actually two symbols, E and I, right? What is T? T comprises of four symbols, A, B, 0, 1. Next is, so whenever you see the production rule, all that is available in the left hand side of the arrows, right? That is what is something, the variables. Only variables can appear as the head of the production. Now, this is T. What is S? In this case, S is E, and this is all P. Okay. So, let's take a simple expression and then try to see. So, if I take expression as A plus B multiplied by A plus B and then take it multiplied by 10A, right, plus 11B. I have just used this symbol so you can. Is it possible to write that? Let me just check. Or do I need to change? Oh, because this 10A might not be the valid way of writing because it will not allow you to do that. So let's write maybe A plus B plus 0, something like that. Now, can we derive this expression using the above given grammar? Is it possible? So, if we use the derivation, what you can do, that okay, you start with the start symbol E. The first step of derivation is, what should I do? Which production should I use? Okay, let me number it. The production number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Which production should I use as first one? If I use production number 3, does it make sense? Because what I need the parenthesis. Should I use F, production number 4? But if I take 4, then I'll be able to just generate an expression within the parenthesis. Something will be left. So the right way will be to guess the right production that you should be starting. Otherwise, you will be stuck and you might not be able to derive the right. So if you use production number 3, what happens? You're gonna get E asterisk E. Now, which one should I derive first? That's what is leftmost and rightmost about. Leftmost says that you always derive the leftmost variable when there are multiple variables appearing here in a derivation process. Rightmost says that you derive the rightmost. Let's do the leftmost. So the leftmost next derivation will be that I am deriving this E. What I should derive it into? It will become this. Because I have already got this star, so now I should be deriving the parenthesis and this becomes this. This is because of production 3, this is because of production 4. Next step of derivation, because my leftmost symbol is still E here, not this one. So I cannot go to this E and start deriving. I have to keep deriving this E. So next one, this E will be derived further into which production should I be using? Now I have to derive the leftmost symbol. Good. So production number 2, that becomes E plus E times E, using production number 2. Next, which one should I use as per the leftmost derivation? Which one should I use? Good. So production number 1. How come 1? Okay, yeah, you have to use 1. You cannot directly go from E to A. So you have to use E to I, which will give you I plus E times E. Okay, you guys got it. So next, leftmost will be I. You use production number 5. and you're gonna get that A plus E. So there is a restriction that I am following, that I can only derive the leftmost variable. I cannot derive any arbitrary variable. There were 3 variables, 2 different variables present there. I could have derived this E, but I did not. Then further, if you further reduce, so it becomes A plus I again, using again production 1, A plus B multiplied by E using production 6, and then I'm not going to write the whole thing. You can certainly derive it in this form. Oh, that will be interesting. Let us at least do that up to some step. So I think this is using production number 6. Then what you gonna do? What is the remaining one? The only remaining is just one variable, so you're gonna use which one now? Production number 4. 4? Oh yes, 4. So it becomes A plus B multiplied by E. Then next again, okay, so which one I should use? I can use 1, 6. Okay, so 2, right? So I should be using A plus B multiplied by E plus E. Now, because it's a leftmost derivation, this E only should be expanded. Now I have 2 possibilities. Either I should take this E and convert into A, and then this E I should use to form this B plus 0. Right? But will I be able to derive B plus 0? I am not sure about that. I think you guys have to check it. Right? Because it will. I think you need to have epsilon here at the end to do that, so that I can disappear. If that is possible, then certainly. So okay, assume that this is the 11th one. So then you will be able to do. So I hope you got the concept of leftmost derivation. The rightmost derivation, at this step itself, you should have been deriving this one. Sorry, not this here itself. You should be deriving this and likewise. So I hope you got the point of leftmost and rightmost derivation. Is there any doubt in leftmost and rightmost derivation? Now I think because of this epsilon you should be able to derive, because this becomes E plus E, then further using few derivation steps you will be able to get A plus B times total, if you not using a particular option, so you can always create this, right? Then this becomes I, which further becomes A, this becomes I, which further becomes B, and this E becomes I, which further becomes I0, and using epsilon it can become 0, right? So when you have I0, that can become, if this epsilon was not there, then it was not possible. That's why I just added epsilon. Okay. So what is language of a grammar? If I have to define language of a grammar, so mathematically you can write that language of a grammar is a string which is part of the T star, such that S can have a derivation from the S is the start symbol. So from a start symbol you have a derivation using the grammar G productions, and you are able to derive it. So it's a simple way to write the language of the grammar. Now, there exists a small proof by induction, right? I leave it to you guys to read it and try to understand. The proof is that Y language of palindrome, that grammar that you have done, is it same as the language palindromes over 0, 1. So, what is the proof that is being asked? The proof is being asked is that whatever the language that you are getting, the grammar that we designed for palindrome, the language is same as the language of palindrome. There is a proof by induction from both sides. I think it's a very simple induction proof. You should be able to understand. Next thing is called sentential form. So today's lecture is mostly about terminologies that we will be using. So what is a sentential form? It is nothing but when you are starting from a start state and you are deriving any string, that is called in sentential form. I can use any variable and derive it into something, right? But this particular string that you are getting, so this alpha is part of V union T star, right? So any string that you are deriving and beta might be a same thing. Alpha, beta are similar kind of strings, but if beta is being derived from any other variable while alpha is being derived from the starts variable, then alpha is called as a sentential form while beta is not called as a sentential form. Why sentential forms are important? Because they represent the derivation step from the start symbol, right? And that is why they are important, because if you get a sentential form which is part of T star, that represents a string. So if W is a sentential form and W belongs to T star, it is saying the same thing, that W belongs to T star and it can be derived from the start symbol, right? So this, what is written here, it is saying that W is a sentential form, that it can be derived from the start symbol. Okay, I will not talk about more technical details. Let's practice few examples quickly just to understand how does this context-free grammar looks alike, and then in the next class we will start with the next concepts. So let us quickly jump to few examples that you might have practiced proving that, okay, if L is a language, so this was the first one that we saw, right, that it was not regular. If I have to design a context-free grammar for it, will I be able to do so? I think you can write the production rules using your keyboard also here in the chat box. So if I have to design, I can use this, okay, S, the start state, it goes to 0, S, 1 and then 0, 1, done. I am done. That's all. These are the production rules. If I have to write it in the way, so this is my P, what is my V? V is a single variable S. What is my T? T is my 0, 1. What is my S? It is just S, and this is the production rules. Now, someone asks, what about epsilon? Certainly, if you have to derive 0, 1, is it part of the language? The answer is yes, because I can derive S to 0, 1 very quickly using production number 2. This is my 1, this is 2. Now, if I have to derive 0, 0, 1, 1, what should I be doing? S derived into 0, S1, and further it derived into 0, 0, 1, 1. What is happening? Are you able to see the derivation that is happening? So because I am able to derive this string from this, so any string which is part of it, I can derive it, right? Any string. Now, the question was a very valid question, that what about epsilon? If I had the question, you have to be very careful. If I had the question that if n is actually what? This, then what? Then also epsilon is present there. Then you could have designed the production rule. So one can say you just have a epsilon here. There is a more simpler version which is just this. Because when you have 0 S1 and you use the production rule S goes to epsilon, it by default derives into 0 S1 can be derived into 0 1 using this production. So you don't need another production of 0 1 there. So you can just use this production rule, and this defines this modified language where n is greater or equals to 0. Is it clear? Okay, let's take another language quickly. Is the language clear? The language says that some part of the string is actually whatever the other part is, the reversal. Can you write the production rules? Try writing it quickly on your paper or piece of paper and then just post it. So if I have to post in the chat box, I can use someone is saying it will be similar to palindrome. Okay, let me give a counter example. If I take the string as 1 0 0. Oh, is it always palindrome? Yeah, it looks like it will be palindrome, right? Oh, yes. Correct. It will be palindrome. Oh, okay. Different example. I should. Okay, let's take another example. Okay, now it's a bit different one. Good. Now tell me. I want the number of zeros to be more than number of ones. What should be happening? Try writing the production rules in the chat message. So I'll type your answers here so that you can verify. So is there any class after this class for this batch? Okay. Okay, so we'll end in 2 minutes. Just let's hear the. And if everything is fine this week, I think we should have a practice session for this few of the questions. I think that will be good. Okay, so there is 0 0 S1 and 0 1. Okay. So someone has given that it should be 0 0 S1 and 0 1. Does it always hold? Okay, another option is that P goes to 0 P 1 0 0 1. See, again the principle is always the same for finding a counter string. If W belongs to the language, you should be able to derive W from the start state. If W does not belong to language, you should not be able to derive it, right? So you have to always keep that in mind. The problem with this, let's say, is that if I have 0 0 0 0 0 1, can you derive it? Can you derive this using this? Dhruv, can you derive it? No, right? Very good, Anjusha. So Anjusha has, I think, wrote the correct one anyway. So it's S goes to 0 S 0 S1. Why this is there? If you try to see S goes to 0 S, what it will give you? It will let you add any number of zeros that you want to be in excess than what? Number of ones. Once you have produced enough zeros that are more than ones, then you can switch to the equal number of zeros and ones. The only thing remaining here is epsilon that is missing. Right? But there is a problem with the epsilon. If you add epsilon here, what will happen? S goes to epsilon will also be present, which is actually not correct for this. Right? S goes to epsilon is not correct because epsilon is not part of the language. So therefore the correct context free grammar will be that S goes to 0 S 0 S1 and then 0 1. Oh, you should take 0 0 1, not 0 1. 0 1 will be equal then, right? That is the problem. So the smallest one that is possible is what? A single 0. Oh, you should have that at least. Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's all. I think it is done. Right? So every time you are ending, at least you have one extra 0. So this is 0. You can generate 0 from it, you can generate 0 0 1 from it, you can generate 0 0 any number of zeros because of the 0s. Any doubt in this? Or any counter string that you can give for this grammar? See, the last 0 that we have placed here, because if you see I and j both can be 0. So if j is 0, what happens? Still I has to be more than that. If j is 0, that means 1 is not present. Still you have 0. So at least one more 0 you should have. So that's why this 0 is present to give you the first smallest string that can be possible. Now, when 0 S1 is there, you can always, S will not disappear by itself, like using epsilon or something. S will always disappear, leaving one extra 0 at least. So 0 0 1, the next smallest string that you can generate just by taking the second and third production. Yeah, if there was greater or equals to, then the string might have been different, right? Because if you take I is greater or equals to j, then what will happen? It can be equals to j, that means it can be the same number of zeros as ones, but ones cannot be more than zeros. So in that case, then you can keep a epsilon here, which will satisfy the thing. At place of 0, you just put epsilon. That will be the answer. So I think it is very important. Again, it's not very easy. You have to practice a lot. It is same as designing a DFA, that writing a context free grammar. So go ahead and practice. See you all in the next class, right, with a few other concepts.